There's a moment you hit as a stepmom when you realize you're completely invisible. For me, it wasn't some big dramatic fight. It was 1,000 quiet paper cuts that finally bled out. But the one I'll never forget was when my stepdaughter looked right through me and asked my husband what was for dinner while I was literally standing at the stove cooking it. She didn't mean to be cruel. She wasn't a monster. But in that moment, she just didn't see me. I wasn't a person in the room. I was a function of the kitchen. And in that hollowed out silent space where I was supposed to be, I knew something had to die. My need to be liked, my role as the unpaid household manager, my desperate, draining hope of ever truly fitting into a story that had started long before I got there. And that S when I decided on my final revenge, a revenge that had nothing to do with them and everything to do with me. I was going to stop trying altogether. If you have ever felt like a ghost in your own home, like you're screaming but no one can hear you, then this story is for you. Because I'm going to tell you how letting go of the rope didn't just save my life, it forced everyone else to finally learn how to stand on their own 2 feet. That dinner incident wasn't at the beginning. It was the end of a very long, very quiet war I'd been waging with myself. For years, I had been following a script that society hands to every woman who falls in love with a man who has kids. It's a script filled with unspoken rules and impossible expectations. The script says, love his kids as if they were your own, but also, know your place. You are not their mom. The script says, create a warm, welcoming, stable home. But remember, it is not really your home. You are a guest in a history that doesn't include you. The script says, be patient, be kind, be the bigger person. Absorb the loyalty binds, the teenage attitude, the silent comparisons to their mother, and do it all with a smile. And the biggest lie in the entire script, the one they whisper at you from all sides. You knew what you were signing up for. Let me be crystal clear, because if you hear nothing else, hear this. Nobody knows what they're signing up for. You can possibly know. You can to know the gut-wrenching feeling of being a stranger at your own breakfast table. You can to know the unique exhaustion that comes from planning a birthday party for a child who might not even thank you. You can predict the complex web of co-parenting schedules, financial strain, and navigating a relationship with an ex-partner you never chose to have in your life. You don't sign up for that. You walk into it one day at a time, armed with love for your partner and a hope that it will all be worth it. For me, trying looked like a one-woman show of overfunctioning. I was the family calendar, the chauffeur, the tutor, the cook, the laundress, and the house manager. I was paddling like a maniac to keep the family boat steady while feeling like I wasn't even allowed to hold an oar. I was doing all the labor of a mother with none of the authority, none of the grace, and none of the innate biological connection that makes all that sacrifice feel worthwhile. I had become what so many stepmoms do, a glorified babysitter, an unpaid assistant, a function, not a person. And the toll was immense. I was drowning in that quiet, insidious stress that is unique to stepmoms. Research shows that women in our position report disproportionately high levels of anxiety and depression, sometimes at nearly double the rate of biological moms. We are so often the emotional shock absorbers for the entire system, putting us at an extremely high risk for mental health struggles. My burnout wasn't loud. It was a slow, internal fade to gray. It was feeling a spike of anxiety every time a text from the ex came through on my husband's phone. It was the deep resentment I felt making another meal nobody seemed to appreciate. It was that constant feeling of being on the outside looking in, even when I was standing in the middle of the living room. It was the emotional exhaustion that experts say is the very first stage of parental burnout, that feeling of being completely drained before the day has even begun. I remember thinking, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm just not cut out for this. It is a shame many of us carry in secret. But here's the truth I've learned, the truth that feels like a giant exhale. You're not failing. You've just been given the wrong map. A map that tells you to try harder, give more, and shrink yourself to fit into the empty spaces of your family. My breaking point was realizing that map was leading me straight off a cliff. The more I gave, the more was expected. The more I did, the less my husband had to. The more I tried to control every little detail to keep the peace, the more my own peace was destroyed. I wasn't just invisible to my stepdaughter. I was becoming invisible to myself. And I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that if I didn't find a new map, I was going to disappear completely. After the dinner incident, I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I went upstairs, closed the bedroom door, and I felt nothing. Just a deep, profound, terrifying emptiness. The burnout was complete. The candle wasn't tea, just burning at both ends. The wax had melted away, and the wick was gone. For days, I was a ghost in the machine of my own life, just going through the motions. And in that quiet, I had an epiphany. It wasn't angry. It was calm. It was the calm of a general who realizes she's been fighting the wrong war, with the wrong strategy, on the wrong battlefield. My entire approach was based on a flawed premise, that my happiness depended on their acceptance. My goal had been to make them like me, to make them appreciate me, to force this collection of individuals into the shape of a happy blended family. And it was destroying me. You know what they say is the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Well, I had been certifiably insane. So I made a decision. I was going to change the goal. My new goal was not to be the world's best stepmom. My new goal was simply to be happy. Right here, right now, in this house, whether they liked it or not. This was the birth of my revenge. But here's the shift I really want you to hear. This revenge wasn't about malice. It wasn't about getting back at my stepkids or my husband. It was revenge on the situation. Revenge on the crushing unspoken expectations. Revenge on the years I had spent twisting myself into a pretzel to please everyone but myself. Revenge on the voice in my head that told me my needs always came last. My revenge was going to be my own radical self-preservation. My new mission was to live for myself. My revenge would be my own peace. My revenge would be my own joy. I realized my overfunctioning, my constant trying, was really a form of control. I thought if I could just manage everything perfectly, the family would be okay. But that control was an illusion, and it was creating a toxic dynamic. It enabled my husband to take a backseat in parenting his own kids. It stopped the kids from having to build a real relationship with their dad as the primary parent in our home. And it set me up as the perpetual outsider trying to manage insiders. It just wasn't working. Of course, this decision was terrifying. The people pleaser in me was screaming bloody murder. They'll think you're selfish. They'll call you a wicked stepmother. The family will fall apart. Your husband will be angry. And I had to look that fear right in the eye and say, let it. Let them think what they will. Let the illusion of the perfect blended family crumble. Because what we had wasn't working anyway. It was a slow, painful implosion centered directly on my well-being. And I was done being the designated casualty. I decided that if I could find a way to be happy, to be a whole person again inside the walls of my own home, that would be the ultimate victory. I didn't need their applause. I didn't need their validation. I just needed to save myself. And that radical act of choosing me was the beginning of my final and most effective revenge. My decision to stop trying wasn't a one-and-done declaration. It was a quiet, daily practice, a series of conscious choices to reclaim my time, my energy, and my identity. This wasn't about some dramatic exit. It was about strategically and intentionally rewriting my role. It boiled down to a 3-step framework that I now realize saved my sanity. First, and most powerfully, I learned how to disengage. This is a hot topic in the stepmom world, and it's often misunderstood. The internet is full of the nacho kid method. Nacho kid, nacho problem. And while there's some truth there, my approach wasn't about being cold or checking out. It wasn't nacho problem. It was not my primary responsibility. Strategic disengagement means you consciously step back from the roles that belong to the biological parent. It's about moving from the front lines of parenting into a supportive background role. It's about letting the parent parent. So, what did this actually look like? It looked like me saying, I'm not sure. You'll have to ask your dad. A lot. I stopped being the keeper of the school schedule. I no longer knew when library books were due or permission slips needed signing. If my husband forgot, that was a consequence he and his child had to manage together. I stopped enforcing rules I didn't make and that weren't being consistently backed up by my husband. Bedtime was a classic battleground. Instead of fighting a losing battle every night, I'd simply announce, I'm heading up to read at 9 Arcady, Surrey. Dad's in charge of bedtime. Then I would physically leave the room. The negotiation that followed, or didn't, was between them. I disengaged from communication with the ex. I took myself off the group chats and email chains. My husband was perfectly capable of coordinating with his co-parent. My involvement was just adding another layer of emotional complexity and anxiety for me. I didn't need to know the play-by-play of every conversation. I just needed my husband to tell me what I needed to know for our house. At first, it was messy. My husband was frustrated. Things got missed. But this was a necessary recalibration. He had to relearn the mental load of being the primary parent in our home because I wasn't carrying it for him anymore. He had to get organized. He had to have the tough conversations. And in doing so, his relationship with his own kids started to deepen because he was fully engaged in a way he hadn't been. My stepping back forced him to step up. For years, my identity had been swallowed by the role of stepmom. My hobbies, my friendships, my sense of self, all of it was on a shelf collecting dust. Part of my revenge was reclaiming the woman I was before I walked into this family. This started with my physical space. The house had become a shrine to the kids. Toys, video games, school papers everywhere. It didn't feel like my home. So, I took back a room. The formal living room, which had become a glorified playroom, became my sanctuary. I bought a bookshelf for my books, a comfy armchair, and a great lamp. I declared it a no-toy zone. It was my space to read, to think, to just be. It sent a clear message. A whole adult lives here, with her own needs and tastes. Then I took back my time. I had a standing Tuesday night pottery class ID given up because it clashed with soccer practice. I signed back up. I didn't ask for permission. I presented it as a fact. Just so you know, I have pottery on Tuesdays, so you'll be on your own for dinner and driving. I started making plans with my friends again, and I stopped feeling guilty about a girls' night out. I rediscovered parts of myself I thought were gone. The woman who loved hiking on Saturday mornings. The woman who could get lost in a museum for hours. The woman who wasn't just a wife or a stepmom, but a person with her own passions. This wasn't as selfish. It was essential. By filling my own cup, I had more genuine warmth and energy to give when I chose to. I wasn't running on the fumes of resentment anymore. I was showing up as a whole person, not just a fragmented role. And that wholeness made me a much more interesting person to be around. The final piece of the puzzle was to completely blow up that idealized image of a blended family. The pressure to feel like a first family, to have that immediate, unconditional bond, is a recipe for failure and heartache. It can take years, often 4 to 7 years, or even longer, for a stepfamily to truly feel like a cohesive unit. Trying to force that bond is often the very thing that stops it from ever forming naturally. I let that dream go. My new definition of success wasn't a perfect family portrait where we all look like we belong together. My new definition of success was a peaceful Tuesday night, a home where people treated each other with basic respect, a partnership where my husband and I felt like a team. I shifted my focus. My primary family unit is my husband and me. Our relationship is the foundation of this household. The children are an incredibly important part of our lives, but the health and stability of our marriage had to come first. If we weren't a united front, the whole structure would crumble. So we started prioritizing us time, even when it felt impossible. We had hard conversations calmly when the kids weren't around about our new roles. I explained that my disengagement wasn't a punishment. It was a strategy for my survival and for the long-term health of our home. I needed him to be the primary parent, and I needed to be his primary partner. Letting go of the blended fantasy was liberating. It removed a crushing weight of expectation. I no longer saw a child's moody silence as a personal failure on my part. It was just a kid being a kid, processing their own complex feelings about living in two homes. My job wasn't to fix their feelings. It was to maintain my own peace in the face of them. This three-step process, disengage, reclaim, redefine, was my quiet revolution. It wasn't about fighting them. It was about finally fighting for me. So what happened when I stopped trying? What was the result of my quiet personal rebellion? The family didn't fall apart. It recalibrated, and the results were more profound than I could have ever imagined. The first change was in my husband. Like I said, there was an initial period of frustration. He was used to me being the safety net for everything. But once he realized the net was gone, he learned to fly. He started keeping track of his kids' schedules. He initiated the tough conversations about behavior. He became more present and involved, not because I nagged him, but because he had to. Our partnership became stronger because it was finally balanced. He wasn't just relying on me. We were relying on each other in clearly defined ways. He was the lead on parenting. I was the lead on supporting our partnership. The most shocking change, however, was in my relationship with my stepchildren. When I stopped trying so hard to be something for them, a friend, a quasi-parent, a cool older sister, they finally started to see me for who I actually was. The pressure was off. I wasn't hovering over their homework or peppering them with questions about their day. I was just there, living my own life, happy in my own skin. My disengagement created space, and in that space, something authentic began to grow. The conversations we had were no longer forced. My stepdaughter started coming to me, not to ask what I could do for her, but to show me a song she liked or to talk about a problem with a friend. Because I had stopped trying to insert myself into her life, she felt safe enough to invite me in. By stepping back from the disciplinarian role, I could build a friendship, which research shows leads to far better long-term relationships. My relationship with them improved, not in spite of my stepping back, but because of it. And what about me? My revenge was complete, and it was sweeter than I ever dreamed. I was happy. That constant knot of anxiety in my chest was gone. The resentment that used to simmer just below the surface had evaporated. I was sleeping better. I was laughing more. I felt like myself for the first time in years. By focusing on my own well-being, I had pulled myself out of the statistical danger zone for stepmom depression and burnout. The ultimate irony is that by prioritizing my own peace, I had made the entire home more peaceful. The power struggles vanished. The tension was gone. The constant feeling of everyone walking on eggshells disappeared. The best thing I ever did for my stepfamily was to stop trying to manage it. The ultimate revenge wasn't burning the house down. It was becoming the calm, happy, centered person who made everyone else feel a little more at ease too. My happiness became the new center of gravity for the home, and it pulled everything into a healthier, more sustainable orbit. My story isn't about giving up. It's about giving up the things that were never yours to carry in the first place. It's about understanding that you can't pour from an empty cup. And for too long, the role of stepmom has been a recipe for running dry. The final revenge is not in forcing your family to change. It's in finding your own peace and happiness, regardless of what they do. It's in discovering that your well-being isn't a negotiable luxury. It is the very foundation of a healthy home. Your revolution doesn't have to be loud. It can be the quiet, radical, and profoundly powerful act of choosing yourself. If this story hit home for you, I want you to do two things. First, let me know in the comments what you're breaking. Point was, or what part of this journey you are on right now. I promise you, you are not alone in this, and there is an entire community here that gets it. And second, if you're ready to stop just surviving and start thriving in your own life, be sure to subscribe. We're going to talk a lot more about the real skills and strategies that separate the stepmoms who are barely hanging on from those who are genuinely happy. It is time to take your power back.